Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Since childhood I knew my future was set. I would become crown princess. But on our wedding night, Crown Prince Julian Xiao deliberately went to the wrong bridal chamber and consummated his marriage with Serafina, a palace maid serving the empress. Serafina was the empress's most favored servant, who had once taken a blade meant for her grace. So despite her anger, the empress momentarily relented and nodded in approval. Father, I was furious beyond words. The Zhao family commands 700,000 troops. How could we endure such humiliation? My parents immediately wanted to storm the palace gates, demanding His Majesty intervene. But I simply tugged at their sleeves, urging patience for the moment. That very day, I personally entered the palace and petitioned His Majesty on Julian's behalf. This subject humbly requests Your Majesty to allow Serafina to enter the Eastern Palace to fulfill the Crown Prince's wishes. She was merely a palace maid. I never took her to heart. He held no affection for me, and I had never harbored feelings for him either. What I desired was never Julian himself, but the honor of being Crown Princess, the future position of Empress, and eternal glory for the Zhao family. My petition for the Crown Prince, to allow Serafina into the Eastern Palace, spread throughout the palace and court before half a day had passed. Some laughed, others mocked, most found it utterly ridiculous. The Zhao daughter, not yet officially invested, had already learned to compromise and grovel. Only father, after receiving my secret message delivered by my trusted servant, sent back 8 words. Remain still as a mountain, wait calmly for rewards. He fell silent for a long while, then finally suppressed the discontent among his generals. 3 days later, the imperial edict was issued. The crown princess investiture ceremony would proceed as planned, while Serafina, with the rank of concubine Liang, was quietly carried into the Eastern Palace through a side gate in a modest palanquin. The investiture ceremony was grand and magnificent. I wore the elaborate, heavy ceremonial robes of the crown princess. Under the watchful eyes of civil and military officials, I climbed the white jade steps one by one, receiving the golden ta and imperial seal from the ceremonial officer. Julian stood beside me, handsome and composed, the picture, perfect model of a future sovereign. Yet the look he gave me carried a cold, probing edge, difficult to detect. I met his gaze, the corners of my lips curving into perfectly measured, dignified smile. He must be wondering why I showed neither tears nor outrage. Why I had even personally delivered his beloved to his side. He didn't understand what I wanted had never been his pity or charity. On our wedding night, as expected, he did not come to my chambers. My maid Iris helped me remove my hairpins and jewelry, her voice carrying barely concealed indignation. His Highness the Crown Prince has gone to Orchid Moon Pavilion after all, to concubine Liang. In the bronze mirror, my features remained clear and unchanged, not a ripple of emotion showing. You may withdraw. In the palace hall, candlelight flickered. I was alone. I walked to the window, gazing toward Orchid Moon Pavilion. Lanterns blazed brilliantly there. No doubt they were lost in tender passion. My heart held no bitterness, only cold calculation. Julian, this move was too hasty, too foolish. He used the humiliation dealt to me to elevate Serafina, yet he failed to realize this very act had placed both himself and his beloved on a roasting spit. A favored concubine causing the crown prince to violate protocol on his wedding night, forcing the Zhao family, who commands the empire's military might, to swallow such disgrace. In this palace where people devour one another, she could only become a living target for the rum to mock. The next morning, I sat in the seat of honor as crown princess, receiving the concubines of the Eastern Palace. Serafina arrived neither early-late, wearing a pale pink gown, her features showing the spring glow of a night spent in passion, with a hint of barely concealed satisfaction. She performed the ritual prostration, her voice soft and gentle. This concubine Serafina greets your grace the crown princess. I didn't rush to tell her to rise, simply lifting the teacup beside me, gently brushing aside the foam, my cold gaze sweeping over her fingertips that trembled slightly. The hall immediately fell into a frightening silence. All the concubines held their breath, not daring to move. After a moment, I finally spoke leisurely, my voice warm yet carrying an authority that could not be defied. Concubine Liang Serafina, rise. Now that you've entered the Eastern Palace, from this day forward you must strictly observe the rules, serve His Highness wholeheartedly, and bear him in hair soon. That is your duty." I bestowed upon her a set of gold hair ornaments, identical to those given to the other concubines. This preserved her dignity, while extinguishing any notion she might harbor of distinguishing herself through favor. She accepted the gift. When performing the ritual of thanks, the smugness on her face finally faded, replaced by several shades of caution. I watched her, inwardly sneering. Julian could give her favor and affection, but what I held was status, was authority, was the power of the mistress of the Eastern Palace. The favor he bestowed flowed like water, but the power I wielded was an iron fortress, solid and unshakable. A few days later, during a palace banquet, the Empress deliberately called me to her side, clasping my hand, her voice carrying a measure of consolation. "Good child, you've been wronged." Julian, he was simply confused for a moment. I immediately bowed deeply, my manner respectful. "Mother Empress speaks too highly. His Highness the Crown Prince is wise and righteous, a blessing to the nation. Concubine Liang Serafina once saved Mother Empress's life. This subject should naturally treat her well. This subject is already the Crown Prince's principal consort. In all matters, I must prioritize His Highness's interests and the stability of the Eastern Palace." The Empress looked at me, her eyes showing genuine approval and relief. What she needed was a crown princess who understood tolerance, grasped the bigger picture, someone capable of maintaining stability, not a jealous woman who would throw the Eastern Palace into turmoil. Upon returning to the Eastern Palace, night had fallen. Iris draped an outer robe over my shoulders, speaking softly. "Miss, today in the palace, why didn't you seize the opportunity to appeal to Her Grace the Empress?" I raised my hand, stopping her words. Walking to the desk, the Crown Princess's seal rested quietly there, glowing with a soft yet cold light under the candlelight. "Iris, look at this seal." I gently traced the exquisitely carved phoenix pattern atop it, my voice calm. "It symbolizes power, position, and the honor and disgrace of the Zhao family. As for where the Crown Prince's heart lies..." I raised my head, gazing at the darkness beyond the window where moonlight cast its dim glow, the corners of my lips lifting in a faint smile. "What does that have to do with me?" Dusk descended. The vermilion walls of the Eastern Palace gleamed in the last rays of sunlight. 3 months had passed since Serafina entered the palace. Julian had truly never once set foot in my chambers. During the day, he still maintained his role as Crown Prince, accompanying me to pay respects at court and attending various ceremonies. But once we returned to the Eastern Palace, his eyes would only drift toward Orchid Moon Pavilion. Gradually, gossip arose within the palace. They all said the Crown Princess held only an empty title, unable to even hold onto the hem of the Crown Prince's robe. I paid no mind. Each day I calmly managed the internal affairs of the Eastern Palace, paid my respects to the Empress at Ning Palace, never uttering a word of complaint. I kept all account books for expenses clear and transparent. The Empress initially offered a few words of comfort, but later, seeing how I never competed or complained, she began to show hints of dissatisfaction. She could tolerate her son being temporarily blinded by love, but she could not allow the Eastern Palace to remain indefinitely without an heir. The opportunity was nearly ripe. One afternoon, as I was admiring the lotus blooms by the water pavilion, Iris approached cautiously and reported softly, "Your Grace, everything has been arranged. Concubine Liang Serafina's brother happened to encounter the third young master of Duke Yongcheng's estate at the Western Market a few days ago." I dropped feed into the pond 1 grain at a time, causing the carp to compete and leap, splashing their tails. The third young master of Duke Yongcheng's estate was famous throughout the capital as a pleasure seeker, fond of cockfighting and horse racing. Serafina's elder brother, since his sister gained favor, had become arrogant and conceited. He couldn't bear provocation. A few flattering remarks, some goading, naturally I'm skilled at such things. Enough to make his blood boil with indignation. "Everything at the racetrack has been properly arranged, hasn't it? Not a single loose end." That fine steed had already been tampered with. It wouldn't run half a lap before panicking. The servants attending the third young master were all our people. I nodded lightly. In less than 2 days, news reached the Eastern Palace. Serafina's brother had raced horses with someone. The horse went mad mid-race, not only causing him to fall with serious injuries but also accidentally colliding with the carriage of Princess Kang Ning, who was traveling nearby. The elder princess was terrified, her health affected. His Majesty, upon hearing the news, flew into a rage. Inside Orchid Moon Pavilion, wails and cries immediately erupted. Seraphina knelt at Julian's feet, tears streaming like rain, begging him to save her brother. Julian naturally wanted to protect her, but this time it implicated imperial elders, and the evidence was clear. He had barely opened his mouth before His Majesty at court furiously rebuked him. For the brother of a mere concubine, you would show favoritism and violate the law, even alarming your own aunt. Julian, are you still worthy of being crown prince of the Eastern Palace? He was confined to the Eastern Palace. Without an imperial decree, he was forbidden to leave. Storm clouds gathered. Yet I still went daily to the small Buddha hall, praying for Princess Kangning's well-being and copying sutras, as if the raging winds and storms of the world had nothing to do with me. 3 days later, someone arrived from Kunning Palace. The Empress, her phoenix countenance pale with fury, threw down a petition. It listed countless crimes of Seraphina's elder brother, how he relied on his connection to the Eastern Palace to seize homes, bully commoners, and oppress the weak with violence. The victims had jointly submitted their appeals directly to the imperial censorate. Crown Princess. The Empress's voice was cold and exhausted. You bear responsibility for this. I immediately prostrated myself on the ground, my voice trembling yet every word clear. Mother Empress, forgive this subject. This subject failed in her duty, unable to strictly discipline the household of the Eastern Palace, allowing concubine Liang's elder brother to stray from the righteous path and damage the imperial family's reputation. This subject is willing to accept punishment. I accepted blame decisively, taking full responsibility upon myself for lax supervision, not mentioning Seraphina even once. The Empress looked at me for a moment, her expression complex, then waved her hand. Rise. This matter cannot be entirely blamed on you. How could she not know where the root cause lay? It was precisely my supposed incompetence and compliance that exposed the lawlessness of Orchid Moon Pavilion and the Crown Prince's utterly shameless favoritism. For the sake of saving her brother, Seraphina cried and wailed day and night, clinging desperately to the Crown Prince, refusing to let go. Even those within the palace knew. The gossip was relentless. That evening, Julian was summoned to the imperial study. I heard His Majesty was so enraged he smashed his teacup, his scolding audible even outside the door. If you continue this foolishness, unable to distinguish priorities, thinking only of romantic entanglements, then this position of Crown Prince, I see you need not keep it any longer. As for that Seraphina, she cannot stay. Those 3 words, she cannot stay, exploded like thunder on a clear day, shattering the last thread of hope in Julian's heart. His Majesty made it clear. Unless he consummated his marriage with me and produced an heir soon, proving the Eastern Palace's stability, otherwise Seraphina's brother would certainly not keep his life. Julian returned to the Eastern Palace with a heavy heart. He had originally planned to find Seraphina, to explain His Majesty's conditions clearly, hoping she would understand his predicament. He had even considered abandoning her brother. Who would have thought? Before he could finish speaking, Seraphina broke down in hysterical sobs, completely refusing to listen to his explanations, stubbornly pressing him to save her brother. Julian watched her cry until she could barely breathe, thinking only of her elder brother. His heart turned cold yet ached. He ground his teeth and asked, "Do you truly want to save your brother so desperately, at any cost?" Seraphina didn't hesitate for a moment, choking out, "Yes, he must be saved." The last light in Julian's eyes extinguished. He clenched his jaw. "Fine. This is your choice. I will do as you wish." When he staggered toward my chambers, it was nearly midnight. The cold moonlight stretched his tall shadow into something lonely and desolate. I sat beneath the lamp reading, wearing my outer robe. Seeing him enter, I showed no surprise, simply rose calmly and performed the proper courtesies. "Your Highness." He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot, lips moving as if to speak, but the words caught in his throat, unable to form sentences. I stood there silently waiting, my heart clear as a mirror. The conditions His Majesty had laid out, and the conflict between him and Seraphina, I had already guessed 7 or 8 parts. After a long while, Julian finally seemed to have made his decision, his voice hoarse. "It's late, let us rest." Red candles burned brightly, illuminating his complex, inscrutable expression. I took the initiative, helping him remove his outer robe, my fingertips lightly brushing his throat. His body trembled slightly, but he didn't pull away. "Your Highness." I extinguished the candle, speaking softly in the darkness. "Tomorrow, This subject will personally seek an audience with Princess Kang Ning, delivering sutras copied as penance on behalf of Serafina's elder brother, pleading Victoria. Julian's voice was hoarse. This time I have wronged her. I moved closer, embracing him, my voice gentle. Your Highness, what are you saying? This subject and Your Highness are husband and wife, one body. Being able to share Your Highness's burdens is this subject's duty. I deliberately leaned close to his ear as I spoke, warm breath lingering. Julian's breathing suddenly became rapid. Dim moonlight filtered in, illuminating his ears flushed bright red. I lowered my lashes, concealing the cold smile in my eyes. Recalling the illustrations in those intimate manuals I had once studied, awkward but proactive, I responded to him. He finally stirred with desire, letting out a low growl and pulling me tightly into his embrace. The deep crimson bed curtains fell, swaying gently through the night. The next morning when I awoke, the space beside me was already cold and empty. Iris attended to me as I rose from bed, speaking softly. Before dawn, His Highness the Crown Prince had already gone to Orchid Moon Pavilion. I sat before the octagonal mirror, meticulously painting my brows and applying makeup. Hearing this, I merely smiled faintly. The woman in the mirror had cloud-like hair and jade-like features, but in the depths of her eyes remained only cold, clear light. Have our people casually let concubine Liang Serafina know that His Highness came last night, only because she cried and begged to save her elder brother. Iris understood, bowing. Yes, Your Grace. If concubine Liang learns it was due to her own pleading that brought this about, her gratitude will surely deepen. I dabbed my lips with rouge, the red vivid as blood. If she knew she had pushed Julian into my bed with her own hands, what would her feelings be? But that sensation of flesh being sliced by a dull blade, that had only just begun. What I wanted was never a single night of favor, but to use that night to drive a thorn between her and Julian, one that could never be removed. Inside Orchid Moon Pavilion, upon learning Julian had spent the night in my chambers, Serafina dropped her teacup in shock. But he promised me, she whispered, her eyes filled with disbelief. When Julian, exhausted in body, came to explain, she initially wailed in agony, but after hearing it was all to save her brother. She was drenched by a bucket of cold reality. She regained her senses in an instant. She threw herself into Julian's arms, tears streaming down. Your Highness had to endure such humiliation for this concubine's sake. Seeing how she forced herself to suppress her jealousy, trying to appear understanding and reasonable, a trace of guilt flashed through Julian's eyes. He held her even tighter. From that night on, every few days, Julian would come to my chambers. Each time, Serafina would stand at the entrance of Orchid Moon Pavilion, silently watching his retreating figure until the door closed, then bite her lip and turn away. Yet my belly showed no signs of movement. Julian had no choice but to visit more frequently. Each time he came, I wore delicate silk undergarments beneath my sleeping robes, burning elegant incense. Following what I had learned from medical texts and intimate illustrations, I cooperated with all my effort. Compared to Serafina, I was even more anxious to conceive. Only by bearing his firstborn son would my position truly be secure. Initially, Julian remained somewhat distant. But human hearts are soft. Seeing I never complained, that I arranged everything meticulously, the tension in him gradually dissolved. Sometimes when dining together, he even asked about my childhood days at the northwestern frontier. The autumn hunt was approaching. When the roster was announced, another set of porcelain was smashed in Orchid Moon Pavilion, because Julian was only bringing me, officially as Crown Princess, to accompany him on the hunt. In the tents at the hunting grounds, spending days and nights in close proximity allowed both of us to let down our guards. That evening as I was bathing, amid the misty steam he suddenly stumbled in, clearly drunk. Seeing my form dimly visible in the bathing tub, he stood frozen. Your Highness, I called softly, showing no panic or evasion. Instead, I slowly rose from the water, letting pearls of water trace down my skin. Candlelight cast a layer of soft radiance over me. His throat bobbed up and down, his eyes already drowning in deep desire. Ah Jun. He called my intimate name, hoarse as sook blown through a crack in the door, then swept me up in his arms and carried me to the bed. That night, he was infinitely tender, infinitely devoted. 7 days later, when we returned to the palace, my monthly courses, always punctual, were now 5 days late. My heart harbored a vague suspicion, yet I continued my routines as usual, showing no difference. Early that morning, as I was pruning branches in the garden, suddenly Serafina stormed in. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Clearly she hadn't slept all night. She spoke bitterly. This hunting trip, you had His Highness completely enthralled. But what a pity, every time he returns from you, he still stops by my quarters. He says looking at your falsely virtuous face truly wearies him. I leisurely snipped a dead branch, not even bothering to look up. Is that so? Then today, throwing this tantrum, does it mean you no longer intend to plead for your elder brother's life? She froze like a snake struck at its vital point, all her arrogance instantly vanishing. She glared at me, chest heaving violently, finally grinding out through clenched teeth. Apart from using my brother to threaten me, what other skills do you possess? In His Highness's heart there will only ever be me. I smiled faintly, handing the shears to Iris. Then I hope you can hold on to that belief forever. She stormed off in fury. Iris lowered her head and whispered, Your Grace, she hates you to the bone now. I fear. Let her hate. I brushed my sleeves lightly, my gaze drifting to my belly that had not yet begun to swell, speaking calmly. Someone whose cards have all been revealed, no matter how deep her hatred, cannot overturn the heavens. More than a month later, a grand banquet was held in the palace. I attended alongside Julian. Serafina followed behind. During the banquet, her eyes occasionally flickered toward my belly, revealing unmistakable restlessness she didn't bother to hide. Taking advantage of Julian stepping away to offer toasts, she approached me with a wine cup, her voice neither loud nor soft, just enough for the nearby tables to hear. Elder sister, it's been so long, yet your belly still shows no sign. My brother in prison, I fear he cannot wait much longer. I raised my cup, taking a sip, looking at her calmly. Concubine Liang Serafina, bearing an imperial heir is a matter of state importance. How can you casually discuss it? Moreover, your brother violated national law. There are laws to handle such matters. What does it have to do with this palace's womb? One sentence turned her face from green to deathly pale. Just as she was about to retort, seeing Julian return, she suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly, her voice choking. Elder sister, this concubine knows you resent this concubine, but how can you curse my brother to die in prison? Before the words finished, she suddenly leaned backward, pulling me with her as we both tumbled into the Taiyi pool beside us. Help! Water instantly flooded my nose and mouth. In the chaos, I saw Julian without a moment's hesitation dive into the water, swimming desperately toward the struggling Serafina. He held her tightly, bringing her ashore. From beginning to end, he never once glanced at me. Fortunately, Iris was an excellent swimmer and immediately jumped in to rescue me. My entire body was drenched, shivering from cold. On shore, Serafina buried her head in Julian's embrace, crying until she couldn't catch her breath. Your Highness, just now this concubine mentioned to elder sister that this concubine might be with child. And she immediately pushed this concubine into the water. Our child. I stared at her in shock, pregnant. I knew nothing of this. Julian's gaze swept toward me like a cold, sharp blade, filled with disappointment and fury. Victoria Zhao, are you truly this vicious? Your Highness, please investigate clearly. Iris immediately knelt down, kowtowing. It was concubine Liang who grabbed her Grace's hand and fell. This servant saw it very clearly. You're lying. Serafina shrieked. You're just a lowly servant. Of course you defend your mistress. Julian's expression darkened like ink. Clearly he believed Serafina's words. He looked at me, my body soaked and shivering, his eyes devoid of compassion, only disgust. Someone, take the crown princess. Before the word princess could finish, I felt heaven and earth spin. My vision went dark. I collapsed limply to the ground. When I woke, I was already lying in the warm chambers of Kun Ning Palace. The Empress was gripping my hand tightly, her face showing both joy and reproach. Victoria, my good child, you've been pregnant for 2 months. Why didn't you tell anyone sooner? I weakly blinked my eyes, my face flushed at just the right moment, my voice thin as silk. Mother Empress, this subject only wanted to wait until the 3rd month when the pregnancy was stable, then give you and Father Emperor a joyful surprise. The Empress, hearing this, felt both touched and pleased, gently patting my hand. You child, truly too thoughtful. Right at that moment, His Majesty entered, leading Julian. His dragon countenance furious, he barked, Julian, you fool. Victoria is carrying the imperial heir, her body weak and vulnerable. How could you push her? Why don't you quickly apologize to her? Julian's expression was complex. Finally, he stepped forward, lowering his voice. Victoria, I misunderstood you. I blinked away tears, gently shaking my head. Your Highness was merely concerned and worried. This subject understands. Standing beside us, Seraphina's face turned deathly pale, her eyes looking as if they could spew fire. The Empress glanced at her, her gaze growing colder. Seraphina, this palace, originally you were sensible. Now it seems this palace was mistaken. Seraphina immediately prostrated herself. Your Grace Empress, forgive this concubine. This concubine was simply too terrified of losing the child at that moment. In my confusion, I spoke without thinking. Julian showed reluctance, attempting to plead. Mother Empress, Seraphina is also a victim. She was also frightened just now, fearing for the imperial heir. The Empress waved her hand sharply, cutting him off. Nuff. Since it's come to this, from now on, stay quietly in Orchid Moon Pavilion to rest. Do not leave without cause. The words struck like thunder. Seraphina's head shot up, her face ghostly white. Those words were no different from house arrest. Everyone withdrew. In the hall, only Iris and I remained. I gently caressed my belly, still flat, the corners of my lips curving into a leisurely smile. This child's timing is truly perfect. Iris lowered her voice, unable to hide her confusion. Your Grace, when did you become pregnant? This servant didn't know. I laughed softly, a sly glint flashing through my eyes. How would this palace know? Seeing her astonished expression, I continued leisurely. But if I acknowledged this pregnancy at that moment, it could not only clear me of any suspicion of harming the imperial heir, but also suppress Seraphina by one rank, letting her taste what it's like to be confined. Why wouldn't this palace accept it? The next day, as expected, rewards from the palace flowed like water into the Eastern Palace. Brocade fabrics, medicinal supplements, pearls and jade, gloriously abundant. Most were delivered to my chambers. By contrast, what Seraphina received was pitifully meager. She stood in the corridor, her eyes fixed on the palace servants coming and going from my chambers, her gaze carrying venomous hatred. I slowly approached, my voice soft as a breeze, just loud enough for the two of us to hear. Little sister, yesterday was frightening. But now you and I are both carrying imperial heirs. You should still conduct yourself with caution. If something disturbs the fetal energy, wouldn't that cause His Highness worry? Those words struck directly at her heart's most vulnerable point. She immediately raised her hand to push me, but I had long been prepared. I skillfully twisted lightly, feigning loss of balance, crying out softly before falling backward. Victoria. Julian's voice rang out at precisely the right moment. He rushed over, just in time to see me sitting on the ground, face deathly pale, hands clutching my belly, while Seraphina's hand still hung suspended in mid-air. It wasn't this concubine, Your Highness. This concubine didn't even touch her. Seraphina frantically explained, her face ghostly white. But I said not a word, only looked up, eyes brimming with tears, silently gazing toward Julian. His brows furrowed tightly. He immediately bent down to lift me up, coldly glancing at Seraphina. Return to your quarters and shut the door. Without my command, you are not to step 1 foot outside Orchid Moon Pavilion. He carried me back to my chambers. The imperial physician took my pulse and reported the pregnancy was not in danger, only requiring quiet rest. I tugged at his sleeve, my voice urgent. Your Highness, please don't blame little sister Seraphina. She was only worried for her elder brother. Your Highness, will you stay and keep this subject company? He looked at my pale face and finally softened, nodding his agreement to stay. That night, I leaned gently against him, speaking softly. Your Highness, tomorrow may this subject go petition Father Emperor. Though Seraphina's elder brother committed wrongs, thinking of Seraphina and the child in her womb, I wish to plead for his life to be spared, so that little sister may rest easy during her confinement. Julian was deeply moved, sighing as he stroked my hair. Ajun, you always understand the greater picture. Generous and forgiving. I have wronged you. I buried my face in his chest, hiding the cold smile on my lips. The next morning, I personally went to the imperial study. Using the blessing of the unborn imperial grandson as justification, hoping little sister Seraphina could nurture her pregnancy in peace, I kowtowed and begged His Majesty to show mercy. His Majesty praised my virtue. Finally, he nodded and issued an edict. Instead of execution, Seraphina's elder brother would be exiled to the frontier, his life spared. When the news arrived, her brother was released that very evening. By dinner time, I had Iris help me apply makeup with particular care, adorning myself with the pearl earrings newly bestowed that day. Iris hesitated. Your Grace. His Highness the Crown Prince went straight to Orchid Moon Pavilion after court. I fear tonight. I gazed into the bronze mirror, my lips curving into a smile. He will come. Indeed, near midnight the palace door gently opened. A pair of arms carrying the cold night air embraced me from behind. Jun, you've worked hard. Julian's voice was hoarse, carrying both exhaustion and tenderness. I pretended to just be waking, turning to nestle into his embrace, my voice carrying just the right touch of wariness. If your Highness comes, this subject doesn't feel the hardship, it's only to share your Highness's burdens. Julian sighed softly, holding me tighter. You're still the understanding one. Serafina, she made another scene today. I said nothing, already understanding everything. Now that her brother no longer faced mortal danger, she naturally had nothing left to fear. She would likely cling to Julian even more desperately, which would only breed his annoyance. Moreover, victory reports from father and my elder brother at the northwestern frontier had just reached the capital this morning. Julian understood better than anyone where he should align himself at this moment. Beyond the window, moonlight hung hazy and dim. Where he could not see, the corners of my lips curved slightly. The pieces were in place. This game, victory and defeat had already been decided. Father and brother's consecutive triumphs at the northwestern frontier delighted His Majesty's dragon heart. The rewards bestowed upon me grew increasingly generous. Julian's visits to my chambers also noticeably increased. Though I knew he was performing for the court officials to see, I was happy to cooperate. Serafina's resentment had nearly overflowed from Orchid Moon Pavilion. Her gaze when looking at me seemed ready to tear flesh from my body. Iris. I set down my teacup, my voice calm. Orchid Moon Pavilion, I fear, will soon make a move. Have our people watch closely, especially anyone with access to medicinal herbs. 3 days later, Iris quietly reported. Your Grace, as expected, someone secretly brought in a package from outside the palace. Investigation confirmed it's an extremely potent abortifacient. I lightly twisted the jade bracelet on my wrist, the corners of my lips lifting slightly. She's truly impatient. Have that package secretly mixed into the bird's nest soup she consumes daily. Remember, she must personally accept it herself. That evening, I was playing chess with Julian. A palace maid from Orchid Moon Pavilion came running frantically. Your Highness, Concubine Liang is bleeding. We hurried there. The imperial physician had just finished examining her pulse and shook his head with a sigh. Your Highness, restrain your grief. The imperial heir cannot be saved. Serafina's face was white as paper. Lying on the bed as soon as she streamed Julian, tears streamed down like horses, pointing at me. It's her, Your Highness, it's the crown princess. She must have poisoned the bird's nest soup this concubine consumed. Julian's gaze darkened, looking toward me. I showed just the right mixture of shock and grievance. What does little sister mean by this? That bird's nest soup is standard palace rations. Both you and I receive it. Moreover, I raised my eyes to look at Julian, my voice steady. Your Highness, this subject finds this matter rather strange. Perhaps we should investigate who handled the ingredients today, and whether anyone has recently been secretly meeting with people outside the palace. Julian immediately ordered a strict investigation. In less than half a watch, evidence was presented. It turned out a palace maid close to Serafina had 2 days prior secretly left the palace to purchase medicine from an obscure small shop. The shop owner's testimony and the maid's confession were both clear and consistent. Serafina completely panicked. No, that's not it. Someone is trying to frame me. I gently interrupted her, my voice carrying subtle implications. Could it be that little sister originally did not want to carry His Highness's child, and thus resorted to such desperate measures? You're talking nonsense. Julian immediately shouted. Why would Serafina not want my child? I put on a hesitant expression, lowering my voice. This subject only heard rumors that before Concubine Liang entered the palace, she had a close cousin in the distance, currently serving in the military garrison south of the city. I heard that years ago, the two nearly became betrothed. Julian immediately turned to stare intently at Serafina. Is this true? Why have you never mentioned this? Serafina's face instantly turned deathly pale. Your Highness, that's ancient history. This concubine and he have long had no connection. No connection. I slightly raised my eyebrows, accepting from Iris's hand an unremarkable cloth pouch. Then why just a few days ago did someone use palace servants to deliver to little sister a package of dried plums from her hometown? Little sister treasured them so carefully, hiding them at the bottom of that jewelry box. Inside the cloth pouch were several dried plums, seemingly the most ordinary things. Julian's expression immediately turned cold as ice. He stared fixedly at Serafina, his gaze stranger and colder than ever. Serafina struggled, trying to get out of bed and grab hold of him. "Your Highness, please let this concubine explain. Those few dried plums were just enough." Julian swung his hand sharply, the force so strong it knocked her back onto the bed. "No need to say more. You worry about yourself." He flicked his sleeves and left, not carrying even half a measure of lingering attachment. Behind him, Serafina's desperate, heartbroken sobbing echoed throughout the chambers. I stood at the threshold, glancing back at her briefly, the corners of my lips curving into a leisurely smile, then gracefully turned and walked into the dim moonlit shadows of the corridor. Tonight, the moon is truly beautiful. Serafina had just lost her child and lost favor, confined indoors, unable to leave. Though Julian did not openly punish her, he never again set foot in Orchid Moon Pavilion, only drowning his sorrows in wine day after day. That night, he came to my chambers carrying the heavy scent of alcohol, his steps unsteady, his brow shrouded in sorrow that could not be dissolved. I quickly stepped forward to help him sit on the edge of the bed. He immediately clutched me like a drowning person, grasping driftwood, burying his head in my neck. His breathing heavy and burning. "Ah Jun." He spoke hoarsely, carrying suppressed anguish. "Why has everything turned out this way?" I allowed him to hold me close, my fingertips gently brushing through his disheveled hair, my voice soft as a whisper in the wind. "Your Highness, worldly affairs can never be perfect. Some things were wrong from the very beginning." My words were like comfort, yet also like lament, causing him to tighten his embrace even more. Sensing he had calmed somewhat, I gently lowered my head, revealing my slender, pale neck. In the candlelight it gave off a soft, warm glow. The faint fragrance in my hair, mingling with the elegant scent of my robes, quietly lingered near his nose. His breathing indeed grew heavier, the hand at my waist gradually heating up. The moment had arrived. I tilted my face, lips nearly touching the edge of his ear, speaking barely above a whisper. "Your Highness, today the imperial physician examined my pulse and said the pregnancy is stable. 3 full months now." Feeling his body tremble slightly in that instant, I continued, my voice carrying shy hesitation. "If your Highness wishes, this subject is willing." His body froze, his eyes swam with intoxication, but in their depths lay hidden complex emotions. Ultimately, everything was swallowed by fierce desire. His throat moved. Then he bent down, infinitely gently laying me upon the warm brocade bedding. Candlelight flickered, the mountain breeze warmed. Tonight, he was more tender than ever before. Sweat dripped beside my neck, burning hot as fire. The next day, he stayed for breakfast, his features showing a subtle dependence difficult to detect. Just as he was serving me food, a commotion suddenly arose outside. Looking up, we saw Serafina dressed entirely in simple white robes like moonlight, wearing no makeup, her dark hair hastily secured with a thin silver pin, standing timidly at the threshold. My heart suddenly skipped. Since she entered the Eastern Palace, had she ever worn such plain clothing? This abnormality, there must be a scheme. "Your Highness." Her voice was hoarse, the rims of her eyes immediately reddening. "Last night this concubine dreamed of the first time we met in the imperial garden. You once said you loved most when this concubine wore clothing like this, like a jade orchid in moonlight." Julian's chopsticks paused, his gaze rested upon her, indeed softening by several measures. Seeing this, Serafina's tears rolled down at just the right moment. "This concubine's fate is humble. I could not preserve your Highness's child. I dare not hope for your forgiveness. I only pray your Highness takes care of your dragon body. Do not damage your health with wine on this concubine's account." Each word struck directly at the softest place in Julian's heart. He remained silent for a long while. Finally, he set down his chopsticks, walked to stand before her, and gently embraced her. "What's past is past. Speak of it no more." Serafina sobbed in his arms, yet her eyes, passing over his shoulder, swept toward me with a clear gleam of triumph. Julian patted her back lightly, his voice gentle. "Come, I'll escort you back." Watching the two of them depart hand in hand, Iris stamped her foot in fury. Your Grace, she still. I slowly lifted a spoonful of bird's nest soup to my lips, my expression unchanged. What's the rush? I gently stirred a clear soup before me, lips curving slightly upward. The more earnestly she performs, the more miserable her fall will be when His Highness sees her true face. Autumn sunlight filtered through the window frame, illuminating my fingernails, reflecting a cold gleam. Let her dance a few more days, it matters not. Days and months flowed like water. My belly had swelled high. The time of birth drew near. It happened to coincide with the Lantern Festival banquet. His Majesty and the Empress, showing special compassion, permitted Julian and me to withdraw early. The carriage rolled slowly through the palace paths. Julian sat in the main position, eyes closed, resting. Serafina sat opposite, her gaze occasionally flickering toward my belly, carrying complex emotions difficult to conceal. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere was extremely delicate. I gently rubbed my belly, feeling the child occasionally kick and squirm, smiling tenderly as I looked at her. Little sister, Serafina, would you like to come feel? This little one has been quite active lately, often kicking me. Without waiting for her response, I proactively took her hand and gently placed it on my belly. The instant her hand made contact, she recoiled as if burned, violently jerking her hand back. At precisely that moment, I followed the momentum of her withdrawal, crying out in alarm, my entire body falling heavily backward, crashing into the carriage wall, then clutching my belly, face deathly pale, voice moaning in agony. Ah, my belly. Your Highness, save our child. Julian jolted awake, pupils contracting. He lunged forward, pulling me tightly, his arms, his voice breaking. Victoria, don't be afraid. I'm here. Your Highness, please don't blame little sister Serafina. I leaned against him, breath weak, tears streaming like rain. Surely she didn't mean it. Serafina was completely panicked, shaking her head continuously. It wasn't me. Your Highness, truly it wasn't me who pushed her. She fell on her own. Enough. Julian roared, his eyes filled with disappointment and fury. Serafina, you disappoint me utterly. Victoria carries the imperial heir, pleading on your brother's behalf time and again without hesitation. And you, out of personal resentment, you act so viciously. What have you become? With those words, his chest heaved violently. He closed his eyes, as if unable to bear looking at her another second. Your Highness, it hurts. The child, I moaned again. Right then, blood seeped through the hem of my skirt, shockingly bright red. Seeing his palm covered in blood, Julian's face turned deathly white. He roared, quickly, return to the Eastern Palace. Faster. The carriage sped through the night like an arrow from a bow. Upon reaching the Eastern Palace, Julian swept me up and rushed into the prepared birthing chamber. For the first time, he left Serafina behind without a backward glance. Inside the birthing chamber, the labor-inducing medicine began taking effect. Waves of pain crashed like tides, threatening to tear my body apart. Sweat and tears soaked my temples. I gritted my teeth, enduring the agony I had long anticipated. Your Highness, this subject fears she cannot make it through. I whispered, thin as spider silk, letting my fragile voice carry past the screen outside. Victoria, don't say that. You will be fine. Julian's voice rang out, carrying unprecedented fear. Serafina also spoke up to console. Your Highness, don't be anxious. Women giving birth is naturally a lengthy affair. She's not some country woman. Julian roared, his voice hoarse and thick. She's been in pain so long. She shouldn't have to suffer like this. Because of whom? Hearing the guilt and heartache in his words, I knew the fire was sufficient. Husband, Jun fears she won't see tomorrow. I mustered all my strength, releasing one final moan, then closed my eyes, collapsing limply onto the birthing bed, my arm falling powerlessly. Victoria. Julian, disregarding all protocol, burst inside, grasping my ice-cold hand, his voice trembling. Wake up. I won't let anything happen to you. I beg you, give me a chance to make amends. Right at that moment, the Empress personally arrived, leading the imperial physician, urging him to wait outside. Julian shook his head, eyes red as he cried out, I'm not leaving. She is my wife. Inside is my child. I won't leave, not for a single step. Outside the room, Serafina heard his words. Her entire body trembled. She could barely stand, her face gray as ashes. The imperial physician immediately performed acupuncture. I hazily regained consciousness, hastily swallowing the ginseng slice the midwife fed me, following her instructions to gather my strength. Crown Princess, the head is visible. Push a bit more. I gripped Julian's hand tightly, borrowing his strength to release one final cry amid the tearing pain. Wah! The infant's clear cry shattered the tense atmosphere. Congratulations, Your Highness. Congratulations, Crown Princess. It's a healthy young imperial grandson. Iris's voice trembled with joy. I lay weakly on the bed, still clutching Julian's hand tightly, my eyes brimming with tears. Husband, our child, I want to see him. The wet nurse carried the infant swaddled in silk and placed him in my arms. Looking at that tender, rosy little face, my tears fell again. Julian carefully took the child, his fingers gently wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes, his voice more tender than ever before. Already a mother, yet still like a child yourself. Crying at the slightest touch. Holding the baby in one arm and embracing me with the other, he gently patted my back. Rest well now. Recover your strength. When you wake, we'll look at our child together properly. In his low, soothing voice, exhaustion washed over me. I finally collapsed, sinking into deep sleep. Outside, night had deepened. Yet the fates of certain people had, from this moment, completely changed direction. News of my safe delivery of an imperial prince spread throughout the Eastern Palace. Everywhere overflowed with joyous celebration. The Empress personally came to visit, cradling the young imperial grandson in her arms, adoring him endlessly. But shortly after, her gaze darkened, mentioning Serafina's harm to the imperial heir. Such a venomous woman cannot be kept, can she? Her voice was cold and decisive. When Serafina was escorted in under guard, her former beauty was gone. She knelt, sobbing, clutching at the hem of Julian's robe. This concubine begs you, Your Highness, spare my life. For the sake of our past affections, please spare this concubine once. Julian showed hesitation. Finally, he raised his head to look at me. I struggled to support my weakened body, speaking softly. Mother Empress, little sister Serafina was merely confused for a moment. Now this subject and the child are both safe, perhaps we should spare her life. The Empress looked at me deeply, finally sighing softly. Very well. In consideration of how you once saved this palace, your life is spared. From now on, you are banished to the cold palace. Go reflect on your errors. Serafina's face turned white as paper. As the eunuchs dragged her away, her eyes looking at me brimmed with bone, deep hatred. The cold palace was shadowy and desolate, yet she refused to accept her fate quietly. Night after night, she sang the old song that once bound her to Julian, her mournful voice evoking memories of the past. Not long after, His Majesty fell gravely ill. We received the edict to enter the palace to attend him. On the way, I suddenly stopped, whispering in Iris's ear. Go prepare things at the cold palace. Withdraw all the guards, then add a bit of medicine to her food, making her sleep soundly until dawn. Iris's gaze darkened. She immediately received the order and withdrew. I wanted Serafina to miss the funeral bells, yet also to have the opportunity to walk out of that place. This final act could not lack her role. That night, the bells announcing the emperor's passing rang throughout the inner palace. The next morning, while the entire court wore mourning white, Serafina appeared lavishly made up, dressed in brilliant red robes, bursting out from the cold palace and rushing directly before Julian. Amid the mourning hall draped entirely in white, she alone wore shocking scarlet, like a specter in the night. Your Highness, she laughed foolishly. This concubine knew you would come for this concubine. The Empress turned purple with rage. Before the late Emperor's spirit tablet, you dare act so madly. Julian instinctively moved to plead. I lightly placed my hand on his sleeve, interrupting. Your Majesty. My voice, though soft, carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. All the civil and military officials are watching. You are about to ascend the throne. How can you abandon duty for personal feelings? Julian's form froze. He looked at the maddened Serafina, then at the assembled ministers. Everyone's eyes held doubt. His gaze gradually turned ice cold. Guards. He stepped forward, his voice laden with grief yet resolute. Drag this madwoman out and beat her to death. Serafina's smile froze on her lips, her eyes flying wide with terror. Your Highness, you can't, you said forever. The sound of clubs falling drowned out her heart-wrenching cries. Everything sank into silence. Julian did not look back, only continued presiding over the funeral rites. I knew in his heart, whatever feelings remained for Serafina had long been erased by power. The new emperor ascended the throne. I was bestowed the title of Empress. My son naturally became crown prince. I proactively selected consorts for him, deliberately choosing women who somewhat resembled Serafina, whether in eyes, bearing or voice. Initially, he found them novel. Gradually, even he could no longer clearly remember what Seraphina had looked like. Court affairs were hectic. The harem bloomed beautifully like flowers. In less than 10 years, Julian had barely passed 40, yet his hair had turned white, his strength depleted. The crown prince, at 15, began supervising the state. I ruled from behind the curtain, handling court and harem affairs thoroughly, without a single gap. Another frigid winter arrived. Julian fell ill and passed away. When the funeral bells rang out prolonged, I sat in Phoenix Grace Palace, gazing at my reflection in the bronze mirror, still graceful and radiant. Your grace should change into mourning robes now. Iris spoke softly. I slowly rose, allowing palace maids to dress me in the Empress Dowager's mourning garments. The woman in the mirror was dignified and commanding, the maternal model for the realm. In this lifetime, I never once hoped for anyone to give me their true heart. What I wanted from beginning to end was always clear: to stand at the pinnacle of power, securing glory for the Zhao family. And now, everything had come to pass exactly as I wished. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.